Order. Order. Question number 8, Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Does she agree with the current Mayor of Waitaki, Clare Curran, who recently said that in his region, quote, internet speed is woefully inadequate with most connections being 5 megabits per second. This situation is a barrier to economic growth and creates an irrational digital divide between our central business district and productive rural area.
The Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr. Speaker, what the Mayor actually said was that in 4 small communities within Waitaki, most connections were around 5 megabits per second. Actually, the majority of residents in Waitaki are able to access speeds of 100 megabits per second thanks to our UFB program. I don't consider, if the member quoted it properly, she would have got that. I don't consider that 5 megabits is, however, woefully inadequate, as it enables most users, like high-definition streaming and use of software as a service like Xero, and it represents a 20-fold increase on what those residents were experiencing under Labour. But like the Mayor, I do aspire to better connectivity for all New Zealanders, which is why we've allocated a further $360 million in this year's budget to continue to improve connectivity, which I note that member opposed.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Is Jackie Dean, the member for Waitaki, correct?
Order. 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 Every member has a right to ask a supplementary question, which now has been asked. I'll allow, in this case, the member to ask the balance of a question, which will effectively rate as a second supplementary.
Is Jackie Dean, the member for Waitaki, correct to say recently about broadband in her electorate, quote, some rural schools have little to no access via modern communication systems. If they climb a platform, stand on one leg and hold their mobile high enough, they may, just may, receive a level 1 signal.
The Honourable Amy Adams. Order. Order. Now, having listened to a very lengthy question, I now want to hear the answer. Well, then be quiet, Mr. Robertson.
I can tell that member that Jackie Dean is a passionate advocate for her community, and like most MPs, she's keen to see better rural broadband. It's unfortunate that Labor opposed it. What that member is talking about is around mobile connectivity, which is different to fixed broadband connectivity, and this government is improving it, something that Labor continues to oppose.
Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it correct that the government rural broadband initiative is a huge success when 72% of people in Western Bay of Plenty say their internet is unreliable or too slow for their current needs, or when just 14% of people in Northland are satisfied with their current connection, which is so slow it won't load the New Zealand Herald website, and where almost half the households across Kaio, Kaitaia, Rawe...
Order. The question is miles too long. The first part can be addressed to the Honourable Amy Adams.
Given that before the RBI program, 41% of rural connections were no better than dial-up, and now 90% of rural connections will be 5 megabits a second, given that we have tripled internet speeds, given that we've moved from below the OECD average under Labor to now well above it, yes, I'd say it is a tremendous success.
Supplementary.
Order. Before I call the member, I do hope this question's in line with standing order. Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Is Fonterra correct to say that, quote, slow internet connections lead to lost time, increased costs, cause significant farmer frustration, increase isolation, and is an impediment to attracting skilled staff to their areas?
The Honourable Amy Adams.
Actually, yes, which is why this...
Order. Now, the conversation between two members down in the far left and right of the House will cease immediately. If they wish to carry it on, I can assist by inviting both those members to go outside to continue their conversation. The Honourable Amy Adams.
Actually, yes, they are correct, which is why this government's prioritised putting $2 billion into improving it. And I hope Fonterra are aware that Labor consistently voted against improving rural broadband. It's not wrong.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Is it correct that the rural broadband scheme is a huge success for those in the Rangitikei area, which just 63% have the internet, takes 10 minutes to download Met service, or those in Ruapehu where during winter holidays and weekends the EFTPOS, which runs the shops, fails completely and makes it impossible to sell anything, and where 50% of households...
The question's long enough. It can be answered. Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr Speaker, for all the reasons I outlined earlier, yes, I do think it has been a considerable improvement on where we started, because as we know, under Labor, 41% of rural connections couldn't get more than bare dial-up service. Now, 90% of rural households will be getting 5 megabits a second, and this government wants to go further, all of which Labor opposed.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Given that her predecessor, Stephen Joyce, said in 2011 that the Rural Broadband Initiative was the best deal for creating a step change in broadband services for rural New Zealand, and in August last
year,
I
have the question,
that please? Member herself said that the RBI...
Order. Member will resume his seat. I'll give her one brief opportunity to ask a supplementary question in line with standing orders. If the member doesn't succeed in doing so, we're moving immediately to the next question. Clare Curran, supplementary question.
Does she accept it's her bungling in the 3 years since she became minister that has resulted in inadequate and snail-like broadband outside urban centres? And if it's not her fault, is she saying it's Stephen Joyce's?
Either of those two supplementary questions, the Honourable Amy Adams.
Speaker, I don't accept any of the member's histrionics. They're about as accurate as her last press release.
Is this a supplementary question?
No, point of order, Speaker.
Point of order, the right Honourable
Speaker, I seek to table an email from the fishing show based out of Kircher saying that the service is so abysmal they will have to relocate.
Order.
He wrote to me.
Order. Order, Mr Brownlee. It's a marginal call as to whether I put it, because I think the point is to make a political point. But on this occasion, I'll favour the member. I'll put the leave and it'll be over to the House to decide. Leave us sought to table that particular email. Is there any objection? Yes, there is. Order. I've now risen to my feet far too many times asking for some cooperation. I had complaints yesterday that all I am doing is threatening members. I'm reluctant to show members out, but that sort of behaviour continuing, the next one who continues to interject when I rise to my feet will certainly be leaving the chamber. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, point of order.
I seek leave to table a picture of the fish I caught on the fishing show, which I understand is larger than any ones at Winston.
Order, I don't think. No. I will not be putting the leave. I don't think that'll help.
Point of order.
Order. I'm dealing with a point of order, Mr Peters. Point of order, Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table 3 documents. The first is the letter from the Mayor of Waitaki, Gary Kircher, which is part of a registration of response form, which was a document included to the Ministry of Business Employment, MB.
No,
it's not readily available.
Okay, name the other
second
two
is a letter
quickly.
from the member for Waitaki, Jackie Dean.
Yes,
and the third which was part of the same document. And the third is a letter from Fonterra, which was part of the Clutha
Leave us sought to table those 3 letters, one from the Mayor, one from the local member, one from Fonterra. Is there any objection? Is there any objection? There is no objection. They can be tabled. Question number 9, Derek Ball.
Thank you, Sir. To the Minister for Social